It was done with a large incision. Many times, like a large midline incision that goes from, the breastbone down towards the belly button.
Yeah. Good morning. Today is Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioner's weekly meeting. Commissioner Gelman, any preliminary remarks? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Good morning. Nothing to start. I would vote to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Plant?
I would vote to approve the consent agenda as well.
As would I. Moving on to proceeding number 24A-0516R, BNSF Rail Company. Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, I'm Alan Farrell with the Rail Transit Safety Section, here today for discussion of proceeding numbers 24A-0516R and 24A-0517R. And I will now address 24A-0516R. BNSF Railway Company submitted an application to replace flashing lights, gates, bells, and signal bungalow, and to upgrade the track circuitry from motion detection to constant warning time for a crossing at Roos Road near Maine in Huerfano County. BNSF desires to make the change because the equipment at the crossings is of an older variety and BNSF no longer has spare equipment in the event of a failure. BNSF plans to update the track circuitry from motion detection to constant warning time in order to provide a more uniform warning time to motorists. BNSF states that most recent traffic volume at Roos Road crossing near Maine as of 1989 is 90 vehicles per day. 9% of this traffic volume is estimated to be heavy vehicles. No school buses use the crossing. The posted speed limit was not provided in the application and there were no 5 or 20-year traffic volumes provided. There are currently 10 trains per day as of 2019 that used a crossing at a maximum timetable speed of 35 miles per hour with no anticipated changes in train volume in the future. There has been one property-only accident at the crossing since 1975, occurring in 1979. BNSF estimates the cost of the project at $282,176. BNSF will cover 100% of the cost of the project. BNSF proposes to start the project on March 31st, 2025, and anticipates being complete with the work by November 30th, 2025. And there were no interventions filed in this proceeding. And unless you have any questions, I have a recommendation.
I think we'd like to hear your recommendation.
Thank you. Staff recommends the Commission deem the application complete, grant the application, and require BNSF to inform the Commission when the crossing has been upgraded, and require BNSF to file the updated National Inventory Form in this proceeding by November 30th, 2025.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks, Mr. Farrell. Appreciate it. I agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree as well.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision deeming the application complete and granting it.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll now address proceeding number 24A-0517R. Colorado Pacific Rio Grande Railroad, or CXRG, submitted an application to change the location of the crossing of Browns Drive in the town of South Fork, Rio Grande County. South Fork desires to relocate the existing campground entrance and grade crossing of Browns Drive to the east for reasons associated with public access and safety. South Fork has been working to accomplish the relocation with Colorado Department of Transportation and CXRG. The crossing surface and road approaches to the existing crossing will be removed by CXRG, as well as the passive warning signs. Browns Drive and the new proposed grade crossing will both be moved 480 feet east of the existing crossing to align with the existing Bonneville Drive on the south side of Highway 160. Passive warning signs at the relocated crossing will include crossbucks, yield signs, ENS signs, and W10-1 and W10-2 advanced warning signs. CXRG states that the most recent traffic volume at Browns Drive crossing in South Fork as of 1981 is 5 vehicles per day. None of this traffic volume is estimated to be heavy vehicles. No school buses use the crossing. The unposted speed limit at the crossing is 10 miles per hour, and there were no 5 or 20-year traffic volumes provided. There is currently 1 train per week as of 2023 that uses the crossing at a maximum timetable speed of 10 miles per hour with no anticipated changes in train volume in the future. And there have been no accidents at the crossing since 1975. South Fork estimates the cost of the work to be $258,956.24. CXRG will cover the cost of sign removal and crossing closure at the existing crossing and estimates the cost to be $5,000. South Fork will recover the remainder of the costs of the project. CXRG proposes to start the project on approval of the application and anticipates being complete with the work by May 1st, 2025. And again, there were no interventions filed in this proceeding. And again, unless you have questions, the recommendation.
I can get a recommendation. That'd be great.
Thank you. Staff recommends the commission deem the application complete, grant the application, and require CXRG to inform the commission when the crossing has been relocated, and require CXRG to file the updated National Inventory Form in this proceeding by May 1st, 2025.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I, and that can be another ABC decision deeming the application complete, granting it with the required disclosure requests. Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Proceeding number 24F-0073, CP Green Jeep Tours, Purple Points Tour Company. Mr. Foreman.
Good morning, Commissioners. Wyatt Foreman of your Commission Council. Before you today is a motion for attorney fees filed by Purple Points Tour Company on November 12th, 2024. Purple Points, formerly Purple Mountain Tour Company, asserts it is entitled to attorney fees under CRS Section 13-17-102, subsection 2, because the complaint filed against it by Green Jeep Tours, LLC, on February 12th, 2024, which was dismissed in recommended decision number R24-0760, lacks substantial justification, meaning it was substantially frivolous, groundless, or vexatious. Green Jeep filed a timely response in opposition to the motion on November 26, 2024, and Purple Points then filed a motion for leave to set the matter for a hearing before an administrative law judge on December 11th. Considering the nature of the motion for attorney's fees, the posture of the proceeding, and considerations of efficiency, Council recommends the Commission refer this matter to an administrative law judge by minute entry.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I. Thank you, Mr. Foreman.
You.
Proceeding number 23M-0217R. RTD 3-year safety oversight. Ms. Terry, and I guess Ms. Whalen at some point.
Good morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. This is Cindy Rose Terry, State Safety Oversight Engineer, Rail and Transit Safety Section. I will be presenting the next two agenda items. The first one is the second quarter 2024 hazards report detailing 32 hazards involving RTD light rail. These 32 hazards comprise of 13 instances of grade crossing warning system malfunctions, 12 near misses incidents, 2 instances of light rail vehicles door opening on the wrong side, and 5 red signal violations, which are referred to as RSVs. All RSV requires a corrective action plan, which are referred to as CAP. The staff review confirms that all hazard reports and CAPs for these violations were completed in accordance with Rule 7350. As this report is informational only, no commission action is required. May I proceed to the next agenda item, which is the staff CAP report summary?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I will be discussing the next agenda item, which is the third quarter CAP summary report that resulted from accident investigations, audits, or hazard analysis. The staff report summarizes 5 new CAPs for commission approval for monitoring to closure, along with 3 existing open CAPs recommended for closure. The first new CAP stemmed from a July 7, 2024 accident involving an LRV whose drive brake handle malfunctioned. The operator successfully stopped the train using a dead man switch. The second cap resulted from an August 8th accident caused by misaligned couplers leading to a derailment. The third cap stemmed from a September 11 incident involving a high-wheel vehicle's gear locking mechanism failure. The fourth and fifth new caps resulted from RTD's internal safety review, non-compliance findings. The staff confirmed completion of the required elements for the three open caps, Cap 02, 11/22, 2022, Cap 01, 9/29, 2023, and Cap 02, 01, 19, 2024, through discussions with RTD, safety personnel, and documentation review. Unless there are any questions, we will proceed with our recommendations.
Yeah, we'd welcome your recommendations.
We recommend that Commission approve the monitoring the closure of the 5 new caps and close the 3 caps, Cap 02, 11/22, 2022, Cap 019, 29, 2023, and Cap 02, 01, 19, 2024.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Ms. Wellen, is there more?
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to present the next 2 items. I am Julie Whalen, SSO with the Rail Transit Safety Section. The first item I'll be presenting is the third quarter RTD accident summary. And on January 11th, 2025, staff submitted a summary report on the investigation of 5 accidents involving RTD light rail and transit control property that occurred from July 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2024. Excuse me. Staff's report summarized the investigation and provides an analysis of the RTD accidents. Excuse me. There was only one injury that occurred during this quarter. The injury occurred when a trespasser was hit by the train. There was one derailment that occurred during this quarter. This occurred by a high rail vehicle. One accident occurred when a train hit a road sign that had blown into the train's right of way. One accident occurred when 2 trains were attempting to couple. The height differential of the wheels caused the train's couplers to not couple correctly and bent both train couplers back. One accident occurred when the train drive brake handle was stuck, causing the train operator to have to control the train using the dead man switch to stop the train. Staff has reviewed the accident reports for the third quarter of 2024 and finds they have been completed in accordance with Rule 7349. And unless you have any questions, I can give a recommendation.
We welcome a recommendation.
Staff recommends that the Commission formally adopt the investigation report submitted by the Regional Transportation District Light Rail.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
Also agree.
as do I. Anything else, Ms. Wellen?
Yes, the next item I have is the third quarter RTD hazard summary report. And on January 8th, 2025, staff submitted a summary report of 43 hazards involving RTD light rail vehicles and transit control property that occurred from July 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2024. Staff's report summarized the hazards reported and red signal violations. Staff provided analysis of the RTD hazards. There were 43 hazards, including 8 red signal violations. All red signal violations required a corrective action plan, a CAP, and none of the other hazards required a CAP. Staff has reviewed the hazard reports for the third quarter 2024 and finds they have been completed in accordance with Rule 7350. And because this report is for information only, there's no commission action required for any events in this report.
Commissioner Goman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I. Anything else, Ms. Wellen?
Nope, that is it. Thank you so much.
And that can be an ABC decision approving monitoring of the 5 caps, closing the 3 caps, and formally adopting the accident investigation reports. So thank you, Ms. Wellen.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 23A-0570G, Ms. Acumbo and Mr. DeCenzo.
Good morning, Commissioners. Juliet Acumbo with your advisory team. I will be presenting with Mitch DeCenzo of Commission Council. On November 21st, 2023, Colorado Natural Gas, Inc., CNG, filed its verified application for approval of its cost assignment and allocation manual, CAM, and fully distributed cost FDC study. Commission rules require that each regulated gas distribution utility in Colorado must file an updated CAM in each rate case proceeding where revenue requirements are determined, or every 5 years following approval of the CAM then in effect, whichever is earlier. The Commission referred the matter by minute entry to an administrative law judge for disposition. The parties to the proceeding are CNG, staff, UCA, and ARM, LLC, and Heartland Industries, who's requested to be excused from participation in the hearing and did not file any exceptions. A remote evidentiary hearing was held on August 8, 2024. By decision number R24-0776, ALJ Han granted CNG's verified application for approval of its CAM and FDC study. The recommended decision approved CNG's CAM as submitted, with the exception of a small typographical correction. The ALJ found that the arguments advanced by UCA and staff focus not on the specific provisions of CNG's proposed CAM, but instead suggest that the opacity of CNG's corporate structure and that of CNG's parent company, Summit, merits the rejection of the CAM application. Ultimately, the ALJ found that CNG's CAM complies with the applicable Commission's gas rules and approved the application. The ALJ found that the proposed CAM meets the requirements of Rule 4503 because it includes an organizational chart of CNG's parent company, Summit, provides a listing of its regulated and non-regulated affiliates, along with a description of the affiliates' activities. It describes how costs will be assigned and allocated, breaks down the transactions with its affiliates, and details the calculation methods used to determine cost assignment and allocation. The recommended decision included a correction on page 14 of the filed CAM addressing affiliate pricing as set forth in Rule 4503. The ALJ determined this is a typographical error and ordered the correction to be filed within 30 days of a final decision in this proceeding. On November 14, 2024, both staff and UCA filed exceptions to the recommended decision. The company filed its response to exceptions on December 2nd, 2024. Mr. DeCenzo will now discuss the exceptions.
Mr. DeCenzo.
Thank you, Ms. Acumbo. Good morning, Commissioners. Mitchell DeCenzo of your Commission Council. I will first address staff's exceptions issue by issue, including CNG's response, and present a recommendation for each. And then we'll do the same for UCA's exceptions. First, staff contends the plain language of the CAM does not follow Commission Rule 4502 addressing affiliate pricing. Staff states that while the recommended decision corrects one flaw in the CAM, it fails to correct others. For example, CNG's CAM provides that it will accept labor from its pricing policy. Staff asserts that Rule 4502E1, which addresses transactions provided by an unregulated entity to the regulated entity, does not provide an exception for labor services. Staff argues that since Summit performed over $9 million in operations and maintenance for CNG, the Commission should be sure that CNG adheres to the Commission's pricing rules for labor performed on behalf of and by CNG. Staff therefore requests the Commission order that labor pricing be corrected in an amended CAM. In its response, C&G contends this specific language was both examined and edited by the ALJ in paragraph 84 of the recommended decision, and the result was to require correction to the language to clarify that all services other than labor will be compensated at the lower of the fair market price or the fully distributed cost. C&G states that the ALJ declined to make a specific ruling on this issue and concluded that the CAM meets the requirements of the Commission rules and should be approved. I can pause here for your discussion or proceed to offer a recommendation.
Do you guys have any issues if I ask for a recommendation? If you can give us a recommendation on this one, I'm going to jump in on the next one.
Council recommends granting staff's exception on this issue. The ALJ did not find that the filed CAM was out of compliance with Rule 4502 and only corrected a typographical error within the applicable paragraph. However, the ALJ did not specifically address staff's contention with respect to the labor exemption. We agree with staff that Rule 4502E1 does not provide an exception for labor services from a non-regulated activity. Therefore, we do not see a basis for C&G to specifically exclude labor, and C&G has not provided a convincing argument for why this should be the case. In its response to staff exceptions, C&G merely indicated that the ALJ made a typographical correction within the same paragraph, and therefore the ALJ must have considered it. Additionally, as far as we can tell, prior CAMs approved for other utilities contain no such exception for labor services. Therefore, Council recommends granting staff's request on this issue and ordering C&G to file an amended CAM removing this exception for labor.
Commissioner Gottman.
Thanks, Mr. DeCenzo. I agree with your recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
I also agree.
As do I.
Staff also contends the filed CAM does not discuss how C&G determines the fully distributed cost or whether the cost of the utility provided the service internally. Staff argues that Summit performs regulatory services for C&G, but that the CAM fails to describe the method for determining the price charge and how the internal price would be determined. Staff contends this is in violation of Rule 4502E1. In its response, C&G states it is aware of the cost of services of its own employees because pay rates are known and time is tracked via employee timesheets, and that these concepts are included as part of the CAM as filed and fulfill the requirement of the rules to include the cost that would be incurred by the utility to provide the service internally. Again, I can pause here for discussion or proceed to offer a recommendation.
No, I think on this one, a recommendation.
Council recommends denying staff's exception here. C&G accurately points out that the internally provided services in question are known and tracked via employee timesheets. These aspects are properly included in C&G's CAM and are in compliance with Commission rules. Rule 4502E1 does not impose any additional requirements above what C&G has provided here.
Commissioner Gottman.
I agree.
Commissioner Plant.
I also agree.
As do I.
Next, staff argues that C&G's CAM proposes too much discretion, specifically referencing the following provision. For affiliate transactions involving the sale of a service, C&G will determine a fair market price through other competitive bids for the service, a market study of the service, or by other measures it deems proper. Staff requests the Commission order C&G to remove the language allowing it to use other measures it deems proper. In its response, C&G points to witness rebuttal testimony where a company witness found explained that there are often more practical and less expensive ways to determine a fair market price than through a bidding process or market study. C&G also asserts staff request is contrary to Rule 4502, as the rule imposes no requirement that the utility incur costs for conducting either an RFP or a market study. I can pause here for your discussion or proceed to offer a recommendation.
Yeah, on this one, I think I agree with staff and UCA and would suggest the following language for your consideration. For affiliate transactions involving the sale of a service, C&G will determine the fair market price through competitive bids or RFPs for the service, a market study of the service, and instead of anything else the utility wants, or by other measures that reasonably prevent ratepayer funds from subsidizing non-regulated activities. So that was something I worked up with council to sort of limit the discretion. So Commissioner Gilman, would you be okay with that language?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate the intent there rather than just a much broader umbrella of whatever they deem appropriate to more squarely point to the actual concern we have to ensure that's what doesn't occur. So, if Mr. DeCenzo is fine with it, I think it's more clear and appropriate in terms of our intent of what should be shown by the pricing.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate you pulling that together.
Mr. DeCenzo, does that give you what you need on this one?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I think that is an appropriate addition in compliance with the applicable statute there.
Thank you.
Next, staff asserts the recommended decision was overly dismissive of staff and its ring fencing proposals. Staff argues that based on the list of issues referred to in its exceptions and the fact that Summit operates CNG, there is more than sufficient evidence to warrant adopting staff's ring fencing proposals. Staff proposes two categories that were discussed in its testimony and in its SOP. First category relates to making cost allocation more specific and clear, while the second category is designed to more directly protect ratepayers. Staff states that when CNG files its next rate case, it could ask for removal of these provisions. CNG contends staff essentially recasts its answer case and repeats its request that ring fencing provisions be approved. The same ones CNG points out that were rejected by the ALJ in this proceeding and by the Commission in a prior securities proceeding. CNG argues that not only are staff's exceptions a repetition of its Commission rejected prior arguments, but that there is no evidence supporting staff proposals here. I can pause for your discussion or proceed to offering a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can give us a recommendation, that'd be great.
Council recommends denying staff's exception here. The ALJ declined to adopt staff's ring fencing proposals in the recommended decision, and Council sees no compelling reason to alter the decision on this point. We point out, and as the ALJ acknowledged, the Commission has previously rejected nearly identical proposals to implement guardrails, including ring fencing, in a prior proceeding. In that prior proceeding, the ALJ found staff's allegation too speculative in nature to justify the proposed ring fencing. Similarly, the ALJ in this proceeding did not find that staff provided sufficient evidence to justify imposing such guardrails on CNG's CAM. Council agrees with the ALJ on this point, and that staff has not provided the evidence to warrant the imposition of such ring fencing in this proceeding.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I also agree.
As do I.
Now on to UCA's exceptions. UCA alleges two primary deficiencies with CNG's file CAM. One, that it failed to include an organizational chart depicting the full extent of CNG's affiliates, and two, that it failed to include a method to segregate and account for the debt service liability that is shared by CNG and its affiliates under its immediate corporate parent and company. First, UCA contends the organizational chart provided by CNG does not meet the requirements of Rule 4503B2 because it is not a listing of all regulated or non-regulated affiliates of CNG. UCA argues that while the provided organizational chart shows the subsidiaries of CNG's immediate corporate parent, it failed to show the fellow subsidiaries of CNG's ultimate parent corporation. In its response, CNG states the chart produced by UCA and purportedly obtained from El Paso Electric Company in an annual report submitted to the Public Utility Commission of Texas was not produced by the company and merely depicts a circle inserted below a box for CNG's parent company, Summit Utilities Incorporated, with the text chain of subsidiaries imposed over the chart. CNG contends the AOJ evaluated the arguments made by UCA related to CNG's identification of affiliates and firmly rejected UCA's suggestions. CNG states UCA did not identify any error in the ALJ's decision on this point, but merely continued to reassert the same considered and rejected arguments made in testimony. I can pause here for discussion or offer a recommendation.
Now, if you can offer a recommendation, that'd be great.
We recommend denying UCA's exception. We agree with the ALJ's finding that CNG's provided organizational chart meets the requirements of Commission Rule 4503. Specifically, Rule 4503B2 requires a listing of all regulated or non-regulated affiliates of the Colorado utility. Under Rule 4001B, an affiliate of a utility is defined as a subsidiary of a utility, a parent corporation of a utility, a joint venture organized as a separate corporation or partnership to the extent of the individual utility's involvement with the joint venture, a subsidiary of a parent corporation of a utility, or where the utility or the parent corporation has a controlling interest over an entity. The diagram provided by the company shows CNG under Summit LDC Holdings, which in turn is under Summit Utilities Incorporated in parallel with Wolf Creek Energy LLC. The chart provided by CNG meets the requirements of the Commission's rules, and we recommend upholding the ALJ's finding on this point.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I.
Next, UCA argues that CNG failed to include a method to segregate and account for the debt service liability that is shared by CNG and its affiliates under its immediate corporate parent company. UCA contends that while CNG has stated that there is a difference in the determination and utilization of dividends as a distribution of profits and dividends used for debt service, the proposed CAM does not describe or explain the calculation methods CNG uses to segregate and account for the debt service among its affiliates under its parent company. In its response, CNG states that at the hearing, company witness Mr. Craig Root explained that debt is funded on the combination of the net assets of the utility and earnings and cash flow generated by each utility. Mr. Root also emphasized that the debt service in question is not an expense incurred by or directly attributable to CNG. Rather, it is an accumulated parent company cost that will likely appear as a debt cost based on the capital structure presented at the company's next rate case. Additionally, CNG contends its omission of debt service in its proposed CAM has no immediate consequence to customers and is an issue more properly addressed in a future rate case. It is CNG's position that allocating debt service from Summit LDC to CNG and CNG's sister company subsidiaries would be improper because no such obligation exists. I could pause here for discussion or proceed to offering a recommendation.
Now, if you could offer a recommendation, that'd be great.
We recommend denying UCA's exception. Council agrees with CNG's response that this issue relates not to the CAM, but rather to the capital structure being applied to CNG through the servicing of Summit's debt and has no immediate consequence to customers. The recommended decision rightly concluded that this is outside the scope of a CAM proceeding and would be more appropriately addressed in CNG's next rate case proceeding. The recommended decision found this is consistent with how the Commission has addressed this same issue in the past and cited to the Commission's most recent decision on this.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I.
Lastly, UCA argues the Commission has authority to review CNG's books and records under federal law and recommends the Commission modify or reject paragraph 77 of the recommended decision, which states, the ALJ does not disagree that utilities must provide information to the Commission and be transparent with certain transactions in order to enjoy the benefits of operating a regulated monopoly, but that transparency does not entitle the Commission to reach deep into the inner workings of a privately held entity as much as the Commission may wish to do so. UCA contends the Commission is entitled under the Public Utility Company Act of 2005 to access CNG's books and records upon written request, and that this statement improperly restricts the Commission's authority of public utility holding companies with utilities in Colorado. And I can pause here for your discussion or offer recommendation on this last one.
Yeah, go ahead. Would this bind us in the next rate case and limit our ability to decide this in the next rate case?
That's part of the recommendation. After review, the Council does not see a compelling reason to amend the recommended decision on this point. The ALJ's quoted statement does not contradict the federal statute or in any way limit the Commission's ability to act in accordance with federal law in the future should it decide to do so. In addition, to do so in this instance would be unusual since the ALJ found and Council agrees that there was no compelling reason to delve into CNG's books in this proceeding. Accordingly, Council recommends denying this exception.
In your view, is that would stop us from taking another look at this in the next rate case?
No.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision, Mr. DeCenzo, granting the exceptions and denying them in part. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Crandall, Mr. Foreman, proceeding number 24A-0380EG, deferred accounting and treatment for wildfire mitigation, excess premiums.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Kelly Crandall with your advisory team, and I'm joined by Chief Advisor Ron Davis, as well as Wyatt Foreman from Commission Counsel. So this item relates to the September 5th, 2024 application filed by Public Service Company of Colorado, seeking approval to establish an excess liability insurance premium deferral and tracker, which the company largely attributes to the increasing costs associated with wildfire risk. The company also requested expedited treatment for this proceeding. By decision number C24-0719I, the Commission deemed the application complete, established parties, and set an expedited procedural schedule. The parties to the proceeding are Public Service, trial staff of the Commission, Office of Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, and Colorado Energy Consumers, or CEC. Commission held an evidentiary hearing on November 21st, and parties timely filed statements of position on December 11th. We have one item for your deliberation today, which is whether the Commission should approve Public Service's request to establish a deferred account for excess insurance liability insurance premiums, and if so, whether it should incorporate any modifications proposed by parties in their statements of position or SOPs. And if it's okay with you all, I can present the key arguments from each of the 4 SOPs and then turn back to you all for deliberations. It's a bit long initially, but it should provide all the foundation you all need for your discussion.
That'd be great.
Thank you. The first SOP is from Public Service, which recommends the Commission approve its request as modified in its SOP for an October 26, 2024 start date for the excess liability insurance premium deferral. It also proposes some constraints the Commission could place on the accounting order if desired. Overall, it argues approval is necessary because of current and anticipated future volatility of insurance prices, given that the Colorado component of the premium increased almost 300% for October 24th to October 25th, and this significantly exceeds prior year-to-year increases. It argues that the level of increase was unforeseeable even at the time of filing its most recent wildfire mitigation plan and has no historical basis. Public Service adds that it engaged in significant negotiations to reduce premiums, but that insurance costs are developed regionally and are out of its control. Public Service also states that the Commission has approved deferral mechanisms similar to that which it requests in other circumstances, and the costs of excess liability insurance premiums are more volatile and material in this situation. Public Service also argues that other utility commissions in the West have approved similar accounting requests, or that alternatively their rejections are distinguishable. But ultimately, it argues that approving the accounting order doesn't create any harm because issues raised by other parties, such as prudence, allocation of costs across Xcel Energy affiliates or between ratepayers and shareholders, potential impacts due to theoretical liability, and return on equity impacts could be addressed in a future rate case. Finally, Public Service rejects assertions by parties that Marshall Fire litigation could be affecting its insurance costs. Given discussion at hearing, however, Public Service states that it's proposing to limit the scope of the deferral with 4 conditions, including that tracking and deferral would need to be considered in each future rate case, that it would not seek to recover these costs outside a base rate case or a securitization proceeding without the consent of other parties, and that it would be capped at the amount of the premium costs for the annual insurance period. It also reiterates a prior proposal to file a report by June 2nd of this year that addresses how it's optimizing its insurance program. The second SOP is from staff, which recommends the Commission deny the company's request, or in the alternative, it recommends the Commission limit the scope and timing of the request. Staff argues that the company has failed to demonstrate that increased insurance premiums warrant an exception from the traditional principle that they're operations and maintenance expenses that are considered in a general rate case. Staff argues that Public Service failed to show that the increased costs were foreseeable or beyond its control, because general wildfire risk is increasing in the West. It is involved in litigation in multiple states regarding wildfires allegedly sparked by its equipment, which it acknowledged could affect its premiums. Its original wildfire mitigation plan was filed in 2020, making this issue not new. And it described many internal processes it undertakes to maintain appropriate insurance levels and negotiate with insurance companies. Staff also raises concerns that the company is not able to account for which drivers of the premium increase are attributable to its own actions versus general market trends, and that cost increases could become the new normal. However, if the Commission grants the company's request, staff recommends that any accounting order be limited to either 1 year or when the company files its next rate case, whichever comes first. Staff adds the company should be precluded from seeking recovery in any standalone proceeding. And staff finally recommends the Commission require Public Service to continue engaging with insurers and brokers and to report on its efforts in a variety of areas to stakeholders like staff. The third SOP is from Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, which recommends the Commission deny the company's request and direct the company to address these costs in rate cases consistent with current practices. UCA contends that the liability insurance costs are a type of O&M expense that are typically considered in general rate cases, and that's necessary to give utilities a strong incentive to control costs between those cases. Additionally, UCA raises concerns that excess liability insurance reduces risk to shareholders and therefore justifies a lower return on equity, which is also a rate case issue. UCA also argues that the circumstances surrounding liability insurance are not extraordinary and that other Western states have been dealing with wildfire risk for years. UCA contends that several issues should be decided prior to granting the request for deferral, including the allocation of costs between ratepayers and shareholders, the role of the wildfire mitigation plan in reducing risk, and the levels of coverage that are appropriate, as well as whether they should come from self-funding insurance pools or other mechanisms. UCA also argues that neither the in-state deferral cases raised by the company nor the out-of-state wildfire cases raised at hearing are directly applicable here. The fourth and final SOP is from CEC, which recommends the Commission deny the company's request. And in the alternative, CEC recommends the Commission set certain conditions upon the deferral if it is granted. CEC argues that accounting orders of the type requested by a Public Service should be granted sparingly, and that Public Service does not meet sufficient criteria to justify approval of an accounting order, citing Commission decisions preferring holistic review in rate cases. CEC also disputes that increasing insurance costs are volatile or unforeseeable, and states that out-of-state cases are part of the reason why Public Service should have been on notice as to premium increases attributable to wildfire risk. CEC also raises the tension between the company stating that it continues to manage costs through negotiations, while also stating that it has no control over premiums, arguing that if the company is granted a tracker, it will have less incentive to manage those premium costs going forward. CEC disagrees with the examples of other accounting orders put forward by the company as being relevant to the request made here, indicating that they were either granted as part of rate cases or other larger proceedings, or they were based on unusual actions by outside governmental entities and were uncontested, unlike this situation. CEC also disagrees that out-of-state cases are applicable, as they considered the deferral in a rate case or a minimum conditioned its approval with time or cost limitations. Should the Commission authorize the company to track and defer these expenses, CEC recommends the Commission establish some conditions that would limit the recovery, and those include the deferral be limited to no more than actual costs and amount and no later than the renewal for the next year's premium or the next general rate case, whichever comes first in duration. CEC also recommends the Commission incorporate language to limit ratepayer recovery should there be any future liability related to the Marshall Fire. So with that, I can answer any questions or I'll turn over to you all for deliberations.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Crandall. I guess for me, I went into the hearing pretty sympathetic to the company, but thought the parties pretty effectively distinguished many of the other examples in the West from what we're seeing. So I'm back on the fence and really curious to see where you guys are coming from. So, Commissioner Goman.
I'm in a similar situation, so I was a bit regretting my newly found position of going first here.
So that was well timed.
I thought you were going to go first and take the heat off, but no.
Or would you like to make Commissioner Plank go first?
No, I mean, I agree with you, and I'm worried this is just the tip of the insurance iceberg here in terms of what we see coming. I think CEC makes some pretty effective arguments that rather than being volatile, these costs are simply increasing, and that is the expectation going forward. And that's, I think, to a large degree recognized in the company's wildfire plans, not only the existence of them, and that we have been doing this since 2020, but just even the magnitude of the increase of what we're seeing proposed by the company is seems a clear acknowledgement that the risk is significantly increasing here. So it makes a lot of sense to some degree that the insurance coverage is recognizing that. So I'm not so sure it was kind of a totally unforeseen situation here that insurance is rising and potentially will continue to rise. And so I have some sympathy here with respect to the magnitude of the rise in this circumstance, but not so sure that's something we won't, see happen again and again. And I agree with you. I think the parties made some fairly effective arguments that this might not be appropriate treatment in this circumstance.
So you don't have a vote?
I tip toward option one. I mean, like in terms of just denying the application. I can see another path where we could approve it and allow a significant number of the, if not all of the limitations provided by the party. But I gravitate toward a lot of the arguments made by the party, including a lot of the arguments made by CEC in terms of the moral hazard of kind of indifference of the company if we provide special accounting treatment here. And I would tip likely toward denial of the application, but I'm very interested to hear your perspective.
Commissioner Plant, lead us forward.
Yeah, so I mean, look, everybody in Colorado, I think, is experiencing increasing insurance rates, or at least most people. Certainly, people who live in wildfire-prone areas, and this is something that we actually brought up during the M docket. It's something we brought up with Supplemental Direct in trying to get the company to address how their wildfire mitigation plan might be able to lower insurance rates for homeowners who are seeing and business owners who are seeing their insurance rates go up. And we haven't really received any sort of a response on that, but I think that probably an increase in insurance rates was predictable on behalf of the company. The level to which it went up is pretty extraordinary. And I think that, the parties brought up a couple of important points around, a documentation of the causes driving the cost increases, and, the ability to evaluate the process for, extending the insurance, and, what other alternatives were looked at, or what sort of mitigating factors might be considered. And, so, I mean, I on the one hand, I think the tracker proposal that the company has laid out there is a kind of a non-starter for me. That indicates that there's no sort of end date, and you just sort of track it until the next rate case and assume that it's going to be covered. And I don't think that that's reasonable. On the other hand, there's complete rejection, which I don't know if that's necessary either. I think we could expect that, the various dynamics going on in the industry right now are going to have sort of unforeseen impacts on rates. So, I mean, I might lean more towards, the staff recommendation around deferral for a year or until the next rate case is filed, and allow the company to develop some documentation and present that to the parties, and they can address this in a rate case, or get deferral at least for a year and evaluate it at that point. So that's kind of where I feel like that's kind of a middle ground.
Is council out there? I'll turn it over to you back in a second. I just want to ask council a question. If we could we limit the returns on this, or put something in our order limiting the return? I guess a future commission could overturn it. The three of us could change our mind, but is there a way we can tie down limit returns? Yeah, I'm just trying to explore this middle ground where we limit the tracker for a year, do our best to limit future, returns on this, just to deal with some of the moral hazard Commissioner Gilman was mentioning, and incentives to manage this down.
Mr. Foreman, do you want to?
Yeah,
Maybe I could start.
Yeah.
If you want to start, I'm happy to talk offline about this first. This is something we may want to think about further, if this is the direction the commission wants to go.
Ms. Crandall?
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. So I believe there were statements in the record regarding not applying interest at the weighted average cost of capital to any deferral leading into the rate case. So I think that's certainly a direction you could go. I believe that's fairly consistent with other actions the commission will often take with regard to creating a regulatory asset.
Commissioner Gilman, what do you think about Commissioner Plant's proposal to approve a tracker, but put all the guardrails possible on it and limit it to a year, and maybe do our best to the extent it's legally permissible to not give them a return, at least they're not a return at whack?
Yeah, if I could put a little context on that, I'm not, supporting a tracker, but a deferral and no return on WAC for 1 year or until they file the next rate case.
Commissioner Gilman?
Okay, so it would be a deferral of 1 year's increase of premiums. It's supposed starting in October and going till October 2025 or whatever makes 12 months work there. And then no return.
That's what I'd like to do.
Until the next rate case, just to.
Yeah, well, to the extent we can bind a future commission in a rate case.
Yeah, well, but no return in the interim, I guess.
Well, certainly that we can do.
You would evaluate in the rate case. Yeah, I think I can live with it. One thing that's difficult is this is not an issue that's going to go away. This isn't an issue that's going to get better, and so I have some concerns with regard to how we treated this time. I understand these are not precedential and we can look to different treatment next time, but I mean, you see the extent to which everyone relies on what's happened every other time in every other state, obviously. Pay attention to what has happened.
Yeah, we pay attention to what's done in the past.
Well, I think one thing that's important to point out in this discussion, if we do any deferral, if you do a deferral, if you don't do a deferral, when these costs come up in the next rate case, a lot of issues raised by the parties here with regard to kind of shareholder liability, the kind of portion of this caused by claims history rather than general at-large risk changes are very much open issues for that rate case. So I would just emphasize, if we do go a deferral route, even in the limited sense that Commissioner Plant has brought up, to make very clear in the decision that these are very much open issues we expect to be kind of fully vetted in the rate case, and in no way does this deferral indicate that we have any assurance that these are appropriate costs, you know, in total or in any specific part to pass through to ratepayers in the next rate case. So I don't know your thoughts on that as kind of some additional, you know, those issues were not fully vetted in this proceeding, and I think it's fair to be clear that they were not.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would also point out that, I mean, we have a multi-billion-dollar wildfire mitigation plan happening in this intervening time. I don't know what the impacts of that might be on the insurance industry and how insurance is viewed going forward. I would expect that it would have an impact and would reduce risk. I mean, that's kind of the point.
Maybe, but we're in a world where after what's going on in California and Los Angeles,
I mean, it's not going to eliminate risk, but you would think it would reduce risk. I mean, if you're putting in, you know, a variety of different measures. So I would think that would be viewed by the insurance industry as a positive step, and that it would have some impact. I have no idea what or if it would, but that's going to be happening in this intervening period. I think it would be, we can't really prejudge what that impact might be.
Well, I'm fine with that language. That makes sense to me. So are we sort of moving towards a 1-year deferral, all the guardrails discussed by CCC, UCA staff, and trying to limit the return as best we can and clarify that, you know, this is wide open for the next rate case as Commissioner Gilman outlined. Does that work for you, Commissioner Gilman, or you still want to push outright denial?
No, I mean, I can live with it. I mean, I think also acknowledgement of this just probably being an ongoing issue moving forward. You know, we can no longer claim we had no idea this will come up. The trend is up, and the trend is up faster. And I think that's fairly clear at this point. So that might also be fair.
No, no more unforeseeability.
Ms. Crandall, did you need any more details on like the guardrails from staff, BCACC, or, you know, are you good with how it's summarized thus far, I guess, before I give you my final?
Yeah, let me just turn to Commissioner Plant before we confirm. Is this what you prefer? Is this your preference, Commissioner Plant, as opposed to outright denial?
Yeah, I think it's a fair middle ground.
All right. Can you respond to Commissioner Gilman's request, Ms. Crandall? Does this give us what we need?
Sorry, finding the audio here. I believe so. I'm just very briefly looking through to make sure we've covered all the bases here. I would assume you all are in the course of adopting the guardrails the parties have discussed, also adopting Public Service's proposal to file a report on its cost containment practices.
Yeah.
And in terms of the items that the commissioners discussed for a next rate case, I just wanted to be clear that I got the specific ones that you had highlighted. There is actually a pretty significant list across the parties' SOPs as to things that may need to be addressed in a rate case. But Commissioner Gilman, I think you had specifically highlighted the ratepayers versus shareholders allocation, or am I misremembering?
Yep. Yeah. And not to discount any others parties brought up. I'm not prepared to say any of those are not fair game, but I think specifically, especially in establishing the tracker, to make very clear that we in no way have a determination at this point in time about what's an appropriate share of those costs between ratepayers and shareholders, as well as looking specifically at kind of claims history versus risk at large and how that makes that allocation appropriate. That, in addition to many of the issues brought up by the parties, I presume will very much be open issues during the rate case and the actual evaluation of any inclusion of this in rate base.
So,
Thank you.
Ms. Crandall, I mean, we can view this as an ABC order, but I just say to the extent you have questions or there's a lack of clarity, you can just turn this into a TBC order, and we'd handle any ambiguity or questions you may have in a TBC process if there's uncertainties on your side.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I think commissioners, with those two clarifications we made, I'm very comfortable we can make this an ABC order.
Okay. Commissioner Goman, anything else for this discussion?
No, nothing.
Commissioner Plant?
Nope.
Mr. Foreman, anything else you want to say on this?
I just wanted to get some clarification on the limiting return vote here. Was that just a vote on the conditions presented by the parties, or was that something more specific? And did we
I mean, I'd like to limit limit the return on this as best we can.
Are you asking is it cost of debt or WACC or nothing? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically.
Nothing.
I
think in the interim, it's nothing, and the rest gets evaluated in a rate case. But in the interim, until we get to a rate case, there is no return.
Yeah, it's definitely nothing, and I'd like to provide guidance for the future rate case on nothing.
And is that's limited to until the next rate case, or a year, whichever's first? Is that how, or just
that was the staff recommendation, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does that give you what you need, Mr. Foreman?
Yes, I believe so.
Thanks, guys. Greatly appreciate it. Last, we have 24A-0547E. Ms. Dundas, Mr. Mendelson.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Lindsay Dundas of your commission council. I'll be handling this today, but Mr. Mendelson's here for any questions. This proceeding is hitting the discuss agenda for the first time, and it's Public Services 2025 to 2029 Electric Distribution Planning Application Proceeding. Next week, advisors plan on providing a more fulsome overview of the application, but for our purposes this week, I highlight that the plan requests, among other items, that the commission first approve the Grid Modernization Adjustment Clause framework, including Type 1 and Type 2 GMAC categorizations and the performance screen approach. They also request authorization to commence the GMAC and the approval of the associated tariff. They also request approval of the company's non-wire alternative proposals and approach to evaluation, as well as distribution investments, and approval to implement any tariff revisions that are necessary. So again, we'll go into it more next week, but for this week, we have two intertwined procedural decisions to make. Pursuant to the commission's electric rules, when the commission receives a DSP application, the commission shall, quote, issue a decision addressing whether the contents of the DSP meet commission standards based on the information provided in the utility set forth in paragraph 3528D. That paragraph states if a utility claims that any requirements set forth in rules 3529 through 3541 are not yet practicable or provide or currently cost prohibitive to provide, the utility shall indicate several additional information about why it was unable to comply with the rule. Similarly, under the Commission's practice and procedure rules and statute 46109.5, if the Commission does not take action on this application by February 1st, the application will auto-deem complete. Under Rule 3528, the Commission shall issue a determination on the special DSP compliance by January 16th, which is 30 days after the filing. For decision today is whether to toll decisions on completeness required by Rule 1303 and 3528B. You can provide a recommendation or answer any questions.
I'd certainly like to delay deeming this application complete, and would like to see a couple of additional things before we deem it complete. And may want to try and go through some of that today. So when we have the full discussion next week, that's fully in front of you, and you can talk to advisors and counsel beforehand. But Commissioner Gilman, would you be okay tolling the completeness today?
Yeah.
Commissioner Plant?
Yes.
Ms. Dundas, does that give you what you need on this one?
Sure, and I can turn the mic back to you, Chair, after this, but just for clarity, that's an ABC decision only tolling the timeframe for determination of completeness under Rule 3528B and 1303. Just to put the rationale out there, that's just to give us a short but needed timeframe to further analyze the filing. And this
Yes.
won't affect the intervention deadline. So it'll just be an ABC decision stating that the timeframes are told, and any additional conversation is just preparation for next week.
And that's consistent with your recommendation, I believe.
It is, Chair.
Yeah, so I think we need a simple ABC order because it's got to issue basically today or tomorrow.
Correct. So that decision will be short and just tolls the deadlines, and advisors and counsel anticipate it being a short tolling, and that we'll bring it back in the next week or two for more substantive discussion.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I also agree.
Ms. Dundas?
That's it for me.
So I guess I mean, I'm just going to go into, well, Ms. Dundas, are you okay? Are you still okay if I walk through the substance?
Yeah, so the chair has a few issues of, or things for the other commissioners to consider about places to look for more information potentially when we discuss completeness fulsome next week. But again, reiterating, he's just putting it out there for discussion, and it won't affect the order of the decision today.
Correct, and I'm not asking for a vote. And sort of in the same way, last week you put out concerns on the Black Hills Clean Heat Plan for us to consider. I'm just throwing some ideas out here today so you guys can talk to advisors and counsel, in the next week or two. So let me just get back to the top of this. So when I got on this commission 4 years ago, public service companies' total electric rate base was roughly $8 billion. In this case, the company is proposing to spend over $7.5 billion by 2029, perhaps the single largest increase to rate base in my tenure. And in its ERP filing, the company has informed us that they're planning to spend a cumulative total of $43 billion on distribution over the next 20 years, as well as another $38 billion on transmission. For me, these numbers are sort of mind-boggling and deserve careful, thorough, and thoughtful questioning and scrutiny. The Energy Distribution System Modernization Act, Senate Bill 24-0218, which drive this filing, places a significant focus on affordability. Likewise, in virtually every major case before us, we've asked for a long-term 15 to 20-year rate impact analysis to be included in the process. Yet in this case, despite the overwhelming dollar size of the request, the company has declined to provide rate impact information, long-term rate impact information, instead referring to analysis in the ERP, which is across all customers and says little about the long-term rate impacts for the specific customers that will be paying for these distribution investments. So I'd like to ask for a 20-year rate impact analysis through 2044 in executable format. And I'll have some specifications about the assumptions based on the ERP, individual TCAD, and residential customer classes, how to allocate it across customer classes based on the last phase 2 rate case and the data presented in this case. So that's one request I'd like to make. The second request, which I'd also like to see in executable format, is for a more complete picture of the hourly load forecast. In Mr. Eiley's testimony, he shows household peak consumption more than tripling from 5 kW to 16 kW. This seems like it's potentially a stunning shift in customer usage. More specifically, I'd like to see an 8,760 hourly matrix, basically 365 days times 24 hours a day for 3 classes: the residential class, the class that comprises the TCAD customers, and for all retail customers for calendar year 2024. I'd also like to see the load forecast used to support this proposal for each of those customer class groupings in 2030, 2035, 2040, and 2045. And I'd also like the company for each of those forecast years to back out what it's doing on EVs so we can isolate the impact of those changes. I think the company is somehow assuming that there's 2 EVs per household, potentially both charging at the same time. And I just think we need to get under that. I'd like to see them back out the behind the meter rooftop solar, and then back out the beneficial electrification separately, so we can see the impacts of those changes. And the third thing I'd like to see is the historical data starting in 2020 and a showing of what's increasing from historical levels in this case, so we can see where spending is getting maintained and where spending is increased. So for me, until the company responds to these 3 requests, I probably want to delay deeming this application complete. I think these requests, particularly the long-term rate impact analysis, are critical for an appropriate record. So I have a couple more things I'll raise on supplemental direct that I'm going to try and raise next week about moving away, about looking at alternatives to limiting the maximum rating to 75% and looking at maybe a lower load forecast. So I just wanted to get that out there so you guys can consider it in the next week before we do our discussion. So I don't know, Commissioner Gilman, thoughts, responses, or happy to get you something in writing and then you can react with proper notice and consulting with advisors and counsel.
Yeah, I would love those in writing. I did my best to type them down, but I'm not so sure I did a great job. So I'd love to see those today if I could get them. What's the timing, maybe that's for Ms. Dundas, that we're thinking we would have to issue supplemental direct? Like, I mean, this is the completeness determination. So I guess the question is, you want these things, you're thinking for completeness.
Yeah,
or
those 3,
like any supplemental direct issue, or
so the 3 things I'm requesting you guys consider is 1, the rate impact, 2, the load shape, and 3, the costs for completeness. And then I'd like to put the company on notice as soon as possible about the supplemental direct to the extent we can, because I think it's going to be a decent amount. I just think the dollars in this case are, and in the future, are just off the charts. So we better start building this record appropriately as soon as we can.
okay, so there's kind of 2 potential data tranches here. The first is what is necessary for us to deem this complete in terms of is additional information needed that is not there for the completeness. And then there is potentially a second situation, which is supplemental direct, which is really just building a fuller record independent, after it is complete. Is that fair?
Correct. Exactly. Ms. Dundas.
Yeah, that's correct, Commissioner Gellman. So the chair is suggesting utilizing Rule 1303, which allows the commission to require more information before it deems complete.
Okay.
And that's what he's outlined today. Now, that's not something we typically do or not necessarily, and don't necessarily have to do if we find the applicant, if the vote is that the application is complete as is. But there is a scenario in which you request information under 1303, then deem it complete, then set your procedural schedule in a more traditional or typical approach, and that could include supplemental direct, along the lines of how you typically do supplemental direct, which is questions that go more towards understanding the application, understanding the effects of the application, and non-information that you think's critical or required by statute or regulation to be included within the application itself, which would be a 1303 question.
Understood. Okay. Maybe two different timetables here, depending what we think we need for each purpose. Just to plan my life a little for the next few weeks in terms of what I need to get figured out. Yeah, I'd love to see those in writing and talk with them with advisors and counsel, especially I think with regard to the pre-completeness versus after, like, you know, what's the right way to mix some of these, and then also really just get more into the application. It's pretty new and it's gigantic, usual to see what's in there. You know, I had run and MDOC, well, it's still open because we have other aims in it, but looking at the barriers to beneficial electrification and DER deployment, and identified several strong recommendations for the company to include here. So certainly I'm in the process of looking and cross-referencing that. And a lot of my aim was really to ensure that they were very well-informed forecasts that could pinpoint where the investment was actually needed and when, rather than spread like peanut butter, many billions of dollars. So that's a lot of my interest will be in, you know, to what degree did we use the best processes available to ensure that we've really built these forecasts in the most intelligent way. But I have no initial issues with those. I don't know that I'm, you know, I think I'd like to talk with counsel and advisors with regard to the like pre-completion thing. But I'm fine, you know, tolling the completion for today to have that discussion with them and discuss this request more.
Yeah, and if you want to put it on supplemental direct, that's fine for me. I'm even struggling to understand what the impact of the assumptions are on the load shape, which is why I'm asking for the hourly data. It's just really difficult to understand, and the headline numbers are just off the charts.
Right.
So,
and I will point out, probably not shockingly, in other proceedings for other operating companies, we are generally seeing a far more pessimistic view of the uptake of beneficial electrification in its speed and depth, to put it nicely. So I think trying to square these different visions of how quickly and deeply beneficial electrification in its different versions will take hold will be of particular interest to me as well.
I agree. And all I'm trying to do is even understanding what the actual load shape impact of what they're forecasting is, because I struggle to see that. So Commissioner Plant, if you would jump in, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm also learning about what goes in the application approval versus the supplemental direct, but I do think that getting that information, that baseline information, that's sort of the foundation of their modeling, is, you know, pretty critical and also pretty basic to the application. I mean, I had a lot of the same questions initially in looking at their assumptions on load curve, and I don't know to what extent they're modeling any kind of load management, and it seems like on the EV side it's really just non-existent. And then, you know, they've got, I think, 70% of their load growth coming from data centers, and I don't know to what extent they're modeling any increase in efficiency of you know, the data centers, which seem to be increasing in energy efficiency pretty rapidly. So yeah, I think all of those things that you identified would be interesting to look at, but like Commissioner Gilman. I was scribbling down, and I love to see it in what exactly it is. So, but it's all in line with a lot of the questions I had as well.
All right. Ms. Dundas, does that give you what you need to share this script with Commissioners Gilman and Plant and bring this back next week?
It does. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Gilman, anything else for today?
Nothing additional, thanks.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, nothing additional from me either.
All right. Thanks, guys. We're adjourned. See you next time.